Hey, friends, I am delighted to be able to share this moment and this time and this particular discussion with you, part of our end of the year digital retreat. And I hope you've been having a fantastic experience and have been guided into some deep thinking and also some excitement and some joy and celebrating you, because I think that this is what this experience has been about. You know, you go to a lot of places, conferences to get fixed. We didn't want to fix anybody here. We wanted to highlight and celebrate and advocate for you. And so that's what we're doing. And in this discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our theme, stripped. And I want to talk about that in the context of what this might mean for our innovation, for goal setting. Most importantly, I probably should have began with taking care of you and the way that you extend yourself to others. When we survey and evaluate 2020, right, we've dealt with uncertainty. We've dealt with a lot of loss, a lot of grief, things we had absolutely no idea would be coming, we couldn't have planned for, and things when they arrive, we realize systems that we set up exactly strong enough to take care of that. And so when we came together, Alan and I, and we thought about this experience and what we wanted to present, what we wanted to deal with, that idea of what the experience has been for folks who have lost so much, but yet may not be aware of how much they actually have gained. And that was pretty much the context to reveal to you, to convince you, right? And to convince ourselves that you are enough, that you're enough. And the proof that you're here, that you're watching this, that you still have ambition, that you still have a drive. And as many times as I have wanted to give up, I did not. It didn't take us out. And so those frailties, the vulnerability, the suffering, all of that becomes fuel for innovation. And I think oftentimes is conditions our purposes that we have in our life. So I want to talk with you a little bit. Let me share this thought that Brené Brown brings. She says, if we want to reignite innovation and passion, we have to rehumanize work. So powerful, because I have observed the tendency in our culture to really snatch the soul out of industry, out of innovation, out of ideas for the marketplace, making it business, not personal, wherever that came from. But here's the perspective that I offer on marketplace exchanges and business enterprise. And that is that it actually has a very direct relationship with our humanity and the preservation of culture and societies and the diffusive spread of justice, dignity, love, compassion, connection, art, truth, wisdom. You see, we've been disconnected from those values and been told we just need to work to get to a certain status. There's a slide I'm showing you that just captures a little bit. These are some trade routes that were sketched out. I think the dates may go back as far as 1200. But I show you, you'll see the lines and how they're kind of showing, connecting the different nations and countries together. And the point that I'm making here is that the connection that happened between those trade routes and was responsible for the development of cultures, was responsible for the rise of political kingdoms and dynasties. And that cannot be overemphasized. Trade was a major catalyst throughout much of our history, and it has stirred cultural, linguistic exchanges, things that would not have happened had we not had an opportunity. And so here is what I'm asking you. What kinds of social change, what are the conduits for political activism? What are the opportunities for outreach, for compassion, for the uplift of humanity, what are the ways that you can invest in your own real estate, right? And those things happen through commerce. So I hope I'm showing for you, and it may be maybe not an outstanding point, but to say to you that these ideas that you're having about the world, these ideas that you're having about products and services that you want to offer, don't ever think that that's just about making some money, right? Don't ever think that that's just about having something. You are postured through this commerce to be able to condition all of humanity and the world for something that is greater and something that is better and something that's coming through you. Business is not just the product, right? It's people. And it's people always people. And what we know matters much more. What we know matters, but who we are matters so much more. And so that's why we come together in this space with this particular retreat, because we're not going to shy away from our humanity. That happened already one time when we were divorced from our humanity in our production as African Americans, and that was called slavery. And we want to be out of bondage, yeah? So that's where the nature of this talk and this meeting comes from. And we want to practice showing up. We want to practice letting ourselves be seen. Because clearly your industry, your innovation is critical to society, and by extension, it will produce social transformation. And I think it's just one of the ways we transform culture, and we challenge your consciousness through this digital retreat. Raise the level of consciousness, open you up so that creation and innovation can arise. That's you, and that's us. You'll hear me reference Brené Brown's work quite a bit. There's a book that she has called Daring Greatly that's been quite a close companion of mine this year particularly, but has offered me so much. And Brené writes, when our self-worth isn't on the line, we are far more willing to be courageous and risk sharing our raw talents and gifts. This is why we speak to the issue of self-worth and why we approach it through this frame of what does being stripped have to offer us? What does vulnerability offer us in this ecosystem that we're building of movers and shakers and entrepreneurs and goals and having dreams? And the goal of this talk is to discuss what that stripping has enabled for us, and what opportunities are opened up to us as we discover who we are when we've been stripped. And the other part of stripped is also that some of that is just letting go. Like some things get taken from you, and some things the stripping needs to happen when we decide to let it go. Just because it's no longer there doesn't mean that you've actually let it go. So we want to think about those kinds of mindsets as well that happen in the context of attempting and what people call failure, or not succeeding or not reaching the goal. How do we let go of those missed opportunities? How do we let go of the disappointments and still continue to persevere, right? One leg down, one man down, one woman down. How do we keep persevering? And Brené's idea here is that a strong sense of self-worth not only helps us to mitigate that, but gives us the courage we need to just try it again or try it differently. And I think that that's particularly powerful, that we could be running away from the very moment, because it is so big. We could be running away from the moment that needs to consume us so that we transform. In this experience, we asked ourselves, Alan and I talked, we asked this question: why do we keep resisting and countering and arguing with the voice that tells us that we got it, that you are the solution? Why do we doubt the voice that tells us that we are enough? And I have just always, from my youth, struggled with that voice that told me that I wasn't enough. And my mom was the person who would come back and remind me, right? I made you, this is the investment that I made in you. And that voice is not as physically, materially audible to me. That kind of presence has been stripped. But there is a voice that is within that my mother always identified that she was speaking to, even when she wasn't quite getting Corey. And that's who I hope that we're speaking to, that voice from the original, from the beginning, from the foundation. And that's what stripping to the core reveals to us, gives us an opportunity to hear the voice that we covered up, that we muffled with so much of life and so much of businesses and so much comparison and trying to reach this, and if I can perform well enough here. And that voice that keeps saying to you, but if you never do anything else, if you never perform any further, you're enough, you're good, you're awesome. And now you get to live out of that declaration rather than trying to convince someone or yourself that you are good enough to produce or to manifest. Stripped is a conversation to compel your thinking about marketplace engagement, your professional development, your existence as an individual, our existence as a collective community, as lovers, as friends, as supporters, as parents, whatever relational performance, and ways that you show up. I think that what we're angling for is that realization that we didn't realize how little we needed until we didn't have access to it. Somebody say, yes, Lord. When I think about this notion of naked, and I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more about what I think is revealed in the stripping. For me, my earliest thoughts on stripped and being naked, interestingly, are founded in the scriptures. Now, you may not be a believer, or they may be fairy tales to you, and for some of us, they are strong allegories and stories and narratives that help us see through life. I'm presenting it to you as an allegory, as a story, as an account. And it's probably in some way of your life you've heard it or been impacted by it, but I want to use it just to kind of interrogate what we might understand through this particular lens of our theme of being stripped. And that is the account when the divine source, call him God, the divine source of life, of love, of everything, created and enabled human beings much after the image of their creator. And this source of all sufficiency, meaning nothing ever missing, right? Nothing ever lacking, nothing ever wrong, nothing imperfect, creates human beings who are flawed. Now, this is interesting. Is this by design or is this by mistake? I mean, we'd have to argue by design, because perfection doesn't allow you to make mistakes, yeah? Okay? So no limitation creates entities with some levels of limitation, and it's not by accident. And there's intentionality in the marring of this creation. And then a space and a purpose is created for these beings in which they can thrive and function. And at any given moment, they have access, unfettered access to the source of everything. Ooh, do you feel that? Do you hear that? You have access to the source of all, okay? And then this source comes looking for them in this space that's been created for them to live and exist. And the source, interestingly, initiates the pursuit. But when they transgress or violate the conditions of the agreement between them, these original human beings violated, the scriptures recount that their eyes are open to see they were naked. And when they realized that they had been stripped of covering, they hid themselves from the source of love, the source of life, and they hid themselves from the source of light. Thinking about the ways that we hide ourselves when we realize somehow we are having insufficiency or perceive that we are not enough. And yet they hid themselves from the all-seeing eye and source that would complement, right? That would fill whatever might be missing. And I think I want to problematize this because I think that we do this hiding in materiality that ends up kind of relieving our anxiety and our fears. I'm trying to hide from the dread and the shame of not being perfect, not being fully covered. And sometimes we hide ourselves in these bushes, if you might say, if you will, rather. And we become paralyzed by the deficit, by what's not there and what we don't have. It's a way of hiding in response to the shame that we feel, we're made to feel when we realize that we're naked or we've been stripped. Now, this is the line that I would have added to the scripture. When God comes to these original human beings and they say, well, we realized we were naked, so we hid ourselves. The natural response that I would have wanted to recorded was God saying, yes, you are naked. It's been that way for some time now. Isn't that interesting? That somehow this consciousness comes to convince them so well that they are not who they've always been. And they were loved, they were cared for, they were taken care of. So I've had to live through that experience and that understanding that we've always been naked. And it has not changed our destiny. It didn't get them evicted from the promise and the place that they were in. In fact, God was coming to visit them every day. So I guess I'm hammering this home to you to say to you that thing that you think you don't have, the it factor, that what you think you're missing, you know, whatever the decision in your life that turned out that you've been made to feel ashamed of, it's not a surprise to the divine and the all. You've always been naked. And you've always been naked, and you have maintained the power that you have. So coronavirus can't shake that off of you, okay? No pandemic. Being scaled back, having to experience loss, that stripping actually allows for something more powerful to emerge and to be visible and to be sensed and to be grappled with, right? And to be engaged in the light of this loss. So their shame led them to reach for more conveniences to compensate for the feelings that they were not enough. And I'll ask you, how has not perceiving your adequacy, your essential enoughness, I just made up a phrase, right, in the environment and in the environments that you're in, how does it keep you from action? Where does it make you hide? Where does it make you run? What if once they discovered that they were without covering and naked, that they were stripped. What if they would have just not chosen to hide? What if they would have set off in a mode of discovery and exploration? Yeah? Instead of accepting that they were wrong because they were naked. And then we have to ask that question, who even told them that being naked was wrong, was a problem, and that it was something that they should be ashamed of? Being stripped means that we are no longer accomplices to the cover-ups in our life. And if you're going to do the bold, if you're going to do the daring, it requires a risk. And that risk, taking that risk, requires trust. And that trust requires vulnerability. And that vulnerability is exposed in the stripping. God essentially sets up a condition, a partnership. It's undeniable. It's the best deal you ever had. I'm going to make you incredibly weak so that you will see that it really don't take that much to be powerful. Right? I mean, this is an interesting idea that one piece of you, one atom, one cell of you is responsible for the whole of you. That one part of you is a part of the all of you. And much in the same way, that a little power is still the greatest power. Can I say that again? A little power is still a derivative of the greatest power. Yeah? Trust requires vulnerability. Perhaps the universe, God, situates conditions and situates vulnerability, failures, and pain in our life to bring out, to fortify that trusting relationship so that you have and will be dependent on that strength. God spreads the seeds of producing vulnerability so that we become open to the formation of a trusting bond and relationship. And where there's trust, even trust with yourself, right? Where there's trust, there's the opportunity to take risk and have the greatest reward you could ever have. A sense of worthiness inspires us to be vulnerable, share openly, and persevere. It's another quote from Brene Brown. I'm telling y'all, get this book. It's really good. But the secret killer, Brene continues, to innovation is this shame that comes, like that we just described, that comes from this vulnerability. You can measure it, but, we can't measure it, but it's there. And if you really want a culture of creativity and innovation, you have to encourage an ability to cultivate openness to vulnerability. And that requires, right, vulnerability yourself. Vulnerability is a connector to oneself and to others. Shame unravels our connection to others. If you think about this allegory I just told you, the original humans, they were made for connection. And maybe that's why they were naked in the first place. Right? Vulnerability opens us up to a deeper awareness of ourselves and puts us in a relational space. Shame would attempt to come along and terminate that and silence the discovery. Don't let the shame silence your discovery. Again, don't allow shame to silence the discovery. In fact, amplify your discovery. Don't hide. Let your vulnerability, with wisdom, let your vulnerabilities be made known. Because the moment that you begin to situate your vulnerability, touch it, to explore it and interrogate it, and perhaps in community with others, you will begin to define what that purpose is of having experienced that loss, that grief, that disconnection. And that will give you fuel, right, for the solution that comes. We cannot afford to be afraid of the suffering. We can't allow ourselves to be intimidated by the discomfort. The etymology of the word passion, people think like, oh, it's something you're really committed to or you have a strong desire. If you look the word up, it means suffering. So that question becomes, what is it that you're willing to suffer for? Because in fact, what we are able to suffer for, we can transform into joy. And when we make that transformation by coming to ourselves, coming home to ourselves, right? Down to the bare essentials, when we're able to do that, that suffering brings us to a place of gratitude. And that place of gratitude, like a window on the top suite of an executive building, will allow you, give you a vision of all that you actually have amidst even what you think you had lost. So what are you willing to have a suffering passion for? Amplify it.
Wow. And thank you so much to my dear brother, Dr. Corey Bradley, for explaining script and offering us more clarity about the power of vulnerability and letting go. Dr. Bradley, talking about vulnerability, brought up the thought that you can't ever know yourself until you're willing to be vulnerable enough to do so. To truly know something means digging into it. To dig into something means disrupting its comfortable, settled state to unearth the truth of what is beneath the surface. So vulnerability is really disruption. Vulnerability is disrupting your fake peace. Vulnerability is disrupting your false sense of safety and security. Vulnerability is disrupting your disillusioned sense of joy. Being vulnerable creates open holes that lies and self-deception cannot recover. Vulnerability says, no, I am not really happy in my relationship, even though I post 1,000 pictures of us online. Vulnerability says, I hate my job and I only stay because the title is impressive and the money is good. Vulnerability says, many of my friendships are really based on dealing with my pain instead of promoting my purpose. Vulnerability is disruption, but it is also the access point to discovery, which is the entryway to your true power. As Dr. Bradley said, you don't hide your discovery, you showcase it. You display it because that discovery leads to your power. I love Dr. Corey's use of the biblical creation story. Of course I would. I'm a former pastor. To talk about vulnerability and being stripped. God did create naked beings. In fact, you were born naked. And it was then, as it is now, an indication that you are enough as you are. Even in that vulnerable state of being a baby, your nakedness confirms that you are enough. Wow. Naked, vulnerable, and still enough. Think of this. Even leaving the safety of a womb and being exposed into a huge world naked is being stripped. And here you should feel no shame. The biblical creation story says Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. And in their unashamed nakedness, they knew no fear, no reservation, no procrastination, no anxiety, because being stripped is becoming self-aware of your power. Notice that they tried to cover their most private parts with something God made to sustain them, leaves. Have you ever used things God simply wanted to sustain you to cover the real you? Is your money a cover? Is your job a cover? Are your children a cover? Is your business a cover? Is your title a cover? These things were meant to sustain you, not cover you. Wow, that's good. Here is the moment where you shout, strip me, strip me, strip me of every cover, everything that hides the real me, my real power. Strip me. In one of the most difficult seasons of my life, God spoke something so clearly to me, and it was think like trees. At first, I was confused by this. What could it mean? But as I meditated more on it, I came to the simple truth: in the right season, trees let go of their leaves. Letting go is not painful to the tree. There is no resentment for the leaf turning colors and falling away. There is simply an appreciation that the tree can remain through the harshest of winters because it lets go. As Dr. Bradley said, letting go shows you that you can survive with less. I'm not implying that you go sell all your things and live like Mother Teresa in order to live your best life, but you do have to be passionate about achieving the life you deserve. Dr. Bradley said passion is suffering. So that means to be passionate about living your best life is to be willing to suffer for it. And what does that kind of suffering look like? It looks like being willing to sever all the versions of yourself that don't align with your highest version. It can feel like suffering when you start better habits and give up ones that you're accustomed to. It can feel like suffering when you have to eat better and work out more. It can feel like suffering to budget better and say no to some opportunities that wouldn't yield any positive results. It can feel like suffering to believe it is still possible when things have failed many times before. Here is where you learn the power of being stripped. You learn to become naked and unashamed. You learn that vulnerability and letting go, well, we'll call it being pruned, is really just for your development, not for your demise. So chin up. It's level up time. 2021 is going to be the greatest year of love. Yes, it's going to be your best year of financial growth. Yes, it's going to be the most awesome year of healthy relationships. Yes, it's going to be the most fantastic year of better health. Yes, we are walking into 2021 stripped of fear, stripped of shame, stripped of depression, stripped of loneliness, stripped of doubt, and stripped of anxiety. This is the spark age. You are enough. This is your season to let go, to go up. So here's to a year like never before, better and bigger, with better blessings than you've ever seen in your lifetime. Thank you to Alan for this vision and leadership in the creation of this conference. Thank you to Stacy Joseph Harris, Simon Bailey, and Dr. Corey Bradley for offering such life-changing perspectives and thoughts to guide us into this new year. And thank you to all of you who are committed to your purpose, your evolution, and your next shift of brilliance. I'm Byron Jamal, and I want you to have a happy and blessed new year. Peace and blessings to all of you. And remember, you are worth the love you seek. So seek higher love. Take care.